What's up, world? Here for another episode of Dreamchasers, which is a show I created to help people from all walks of life to turn their dreams into reality. Dreamchasers is a show that's sponsored by Gigtown, which is this amazing revolutionary music app which allows musicians and fans of music to go to one place where you can find local concerts to go to. And if you're a musician, you can actually get booked. You don't have to worry about finding a place to play. Really amazing stuff. Post your rates, bio, etc. And you can check out Gigtown at gig.town/dreamchasers.com. Again, that's gig.town/dreamchasers. Today, I am honored to have Josh Trent, who runs Wellness Force, on the show today. Give you a little rundown on Josh. He's an amazing dude. So Wellness Force is a digital coaching business which empowers people to become the healthiest versions of themselves. Josh was named one of the top 50 digital health influencers in 2015, was in iTunes new and noteworthy #1 for health, fitness, nutrition, tons of coaching experience, including coaching yours truly. Josh is complete badass. Really excited to have him on the show because he's just full of great insights and advice. Josh, welcome to the show, man. Happy to have you.
Lucas, what a cool intro. Thanks for having me on, man. I'm pumped to be here.
Yeah, well, I'll let you start and tell the people about how you got started with Wellness Force. How did Wellness Force come to be?
Wow, that's a loaded question, isn't it? I'm sure whenever you ask your guests that question, they always think, do you want to go back to childhood? But I will. I'm going to start at childhood because I think this is really important. A lot of your audience can resonate with this path that we have as entrepreneurs not being linear. I mean, there's no way that we just go straight from A to B. There's a lot of twists and turns. It's exactly how my life was. I was 4 years old, 6 years old, and I remembered at that time that I had these beliefs that were just grilled into my psyche, and they were: people can't be trusted, money is bad, money's evil, and expect the worst to happen. Now, this is a lot of pressure for a young kid to feel. And looking back, I think, okay, the roots of my entrepreneurial journey were kind of forged through pain, which is what a lot of people experience. But flashing back to when I was a kid, I mean, my mom was manic bipolar. My dad was dealing with some psychological tools that he never had from his father. And my mom's illness, my dad not being around, that kind of painted the picture for me in my first decade and a half of life, to where I had some pretty limiting beliefs around not just having the tools that I needed to succeed, but around didn't thinking the tools even existed. So flash forward, I'm 21 years old, 22 years old. I'm 280 pounds. And that was what I used to not feel was food. The reason I got to 280 is because I didn't get the tools and the resources that I needed. And that was a really frustrating time for me. I'll never forget, Lucas, I was at a party once and I was drinking. I think I'm 23 years old at this time. And I was so disgusted with how I felt in my body that I kind of threw down that little red party cup filled with some cheap beer. And I just started to sprint, and I sprinted all the way home. I sprinted like 3 miles. I got home, I pulled out my computer, and I just typed in, like, how do I lose weight forever? How do I actually get healthy for the long term? And the next year was pretty much trial by fire, man. I spent the next 12 months going through different starvation diets and learning about kind of quasi hack methods to lose weight, but never really long term. And I lost and gained over 90 pounds. Then when I was 24 years old, I got so frustrated that I just actually quit my job. I saved up $10,000 and I moved to Hawaii. And I wanted to just really dedicate my life to getting better from the inside out. But as I'm sure anybody listening can relate, I mean, moving somewhere new, which is what I did, I actually moved out to the island of Oahu. I thought in my mind, if I change my environment, if I change my scenery, then everything will make sense and I'll have this new life and things will be different. But as I'm sure you can relate to, if you're on the other side of this microphone or headphones, wherever you go, there you are. And I took my beliefs and my stories and my lack of tool sets with me. So I'm in Hawaii, I'm working out, I'm doing all these things. And a manager came up to me and said, "Hey, I've seen you working out. You should think about being a trainer." And I was like, "What's a trainer?" I didn't even know what a personal trainer was because I had been like an athlete in high school and whatnot. And so that sparked me into just finding this total career of being a health and wellness professional, a trainer. And I just had this lightning bolt moment where I thought, this is a road I'm already on myself. I'm learning about how to make my life sustainably healthy. I'm actually going to help other people do the same thing. And that was what I did for 10 years. But then when I got to the end of that decade, where I had trained thousands of people and helped hundreds of people lose weight and ran teams and ran gyms, I got to this point, Lucas, where I just couldn't bear the weight of these beliefs anymore, these limiting beliefs. And I actually stepped away from the fitness industry. I work for a endurance sports company here in San Diego and just learned about technology. And in that process, learned that I wasn't cut out to just have a job. I have to have a passion for what I do for work. And so that led me to doing more inner work. I was with a woman at the time, and she was kind enough to show me that these beliefs were still there, which is something I was sober blind to, that really derails a lot of entrepreneurs, their limiting belief sets. And so I did about 3 years of work to flash forward where I am now. I actually got to go to a two-phase seminar in Los Angeles. It's called Mastery and Transformational Training, as well as a bunch of other courses. And then I realized that I got to face my beliefs, actually go through them, because the only way out is through. And a lot of people try to skirt the issues. And I did not want to do that anymore, because it had been really the reason that derailed me from health in the first place. But flash forward to 2015, I'm now working with people. I'm using digital technology that was inspired when I saw a film by two Olympic athletes, Sky and Tamara Christofferson. They had a film called Personal Gold. And I had this moment where I knew that I didn't want to train people in gyms anymore. And I knew I wanted to transition my business to being more virtual so I could scale and effectively help more people. But I wasn't quite sure how to do that. But then I had another kind of a lightning bolt moment, similar to the one that I had in Hawaii 10 years prior. And I realized, wow, if in this film, these Olympic athletes use digital health technologies and quantified self technologies to win the silver medal in the Olympic Games, what could this digital health technology do for the average person who's trying to let go of old weight and get more energy and plug in better wellness into their just busy modern life? And I had this moment where I pulled over. I had my girlfriend at the time record a 10-minute monologue where I just talked about how I'm going to have coaching groups. I'm going to use these devices for increased accountability. I'm going to help other health and wellness professionals. And that's exactly what the rest of 2015 was. It was executing on that initial spark that I felt through going through, as I said in the beginning, this non-linear path, Lucas. So now what I do is two phases. I help people let go of old weight, typically moms 35 or older. And I also help them use digital health as a sustainable behavior change model. And then the other half of my business is helping amazing, inspiring guys like yourself go through their process. As we know, as entrepreneurs, that's not linear. Go through their process of learning what tools, learning what resources, learning what steps to take, kind of figuring out who you are, what you do, and why you do it. And so those are the two ways that I've really scaled Wellness Force for 2016.
Wow, that was an amazing intro. There are about 5 or 6 gold nuggets just in that little intro. So I would advise pausing, going back, listening to what Josh just said about his introduction. And Josh, it would be great to hear you elaborate a little bit more on those first steps that entrepreneurs take to really figure out the who you are and kind of the first steps in really finding yourself as an entrepreneur. I know it was really helpful for me. So it'd be great if you could share a little bit more about that framework you've created for the people out there.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we all have these amazing ideas, right? You wake up in the morning, you're like, oh my God, I'm going to create this group and I'm going to run this kind of club and I'm going to have this kind of program. But then comes the execution. So there's this knowledge and ideas that we have on the left, and then there's execution on the right. Well, in between the left and the right is this massive bridge. And I think really what connects the knowing and the doing is the bridge. It's the bridge of trusting your intuition, building your intuitive edge as a human being, as an entrepreneur. But that shaving down, that grinding of that intuitive edge happens through experience. You have to get dirty. You have to get bloody. You have to fail. I actually don't like the word fail, Lucas, because I feel like failure is really just a lesson wrapped up in a shiny box. And I think that failing 10 times is actually a good thing, because sooner or later you're going to strike gold. But back to figuring out who you are, the actual practical steps. I think there's 3 main things that people need to do. They need to have an honest conversation with themselves about who they really are. And I've developed some forms and I have some ideas through my experience of what that looks like. But it's having this real, brutal, sometimes painful conversation with yourself and saying, okay, who am I? What is my story? Because my story is unique. whatever experiences or trials or tribulations I've been through in my life, whether you're 20, 30, 40, however old you are, your story is unique. And that is the cement. That is the groundwork for however you're going to scale your business and serve. That comes back to that story, who you are. I mean, I shared a little bit of my story. My entrepreneurial story was framed by pain. And I think that doesn't have to be like that for everyone. Sometimes you can find your path through just finding love and joy and peace. But a lot of times I've found that looking inside and really doing the inner work is the first step. It's figuring out what makes you sad, what makes you upset, what makes you angry, like what is out there in the world, what kind of itch do you want to scratch in the world? Because typically it comes from an itch of your very own. And then secondly, you need to figure out who are the people in my circle that I can lean to, that I can give value to. When I'm first started 5, 6 years ago, really networking, I started to just reach out to the people in my space that were the most intense, educational, and just inspiring people. And then my only question to them was, hey, how can I be of service to you? So I would write people and I would say, hey, I've listened to your YouTube video, or I've listened to your podcast and I shared it with 10 of my friends, or whatever it is. Add value to the people that are inspiring you. That's going to scale and propel you way more than just asking people for their time or asking people if they can do something for you. So that first piece, going deep, asking yourself, having the real conversation. Who am I? What makes me upset? What makes me sad? Secondly, doing the inner work, really feeling that. Right after that, number two, reaching out to your community, being of service to the people in your community, whatever space you're in. You could be a passionate salesperson. You could be a passionate health and wellness professional, but just figuring out in your circle, who are those people and how can you be of service to them? And then lastly, be willing to pivot. I mean, I can't tell you how many times that I've done projects for 6 months and then scrapped them because I just had to be honest with myself. And I realized through different market analysis that my idea wasn't what I thought it was going to be. So really inner work, reaching out to people in your community, being of service to the leaders. And then third, being willing to pivot. I think that's how you figure out who you are.
That's great. And I think you hit upon an important point, which is reaching out to other people who are on your level or people who might be above your level. And it'd be great if you could share a little bit more about specifically how you reach out to influencers, how to create relationships with those individuals. Little story for our audience. I got a great lesson very early on in my coaching, well, before we even coaching clients with with Josh, where I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted from our relationship, and really was not coming from a place of generosity in helping him. So it kind of created a negative start to our relationship, and kind of like Josh was saying as well, where sometimes your mistake can end up being a positive, and that's how it ended up happening for me. So, it's okay to make mistakes when you're reaching out to influencers because that's part of the process. However, also why we created this show is to help you may avoid the mistakes like I made. So Josh, it'd be great to get your insights on how to effectively reach influencers, make relationships that are beneficial for both parties.
Did I lose you?
You're just froze on me.
Okay,
Just
how about now?
keep going.
Okay, cool. You just mark the time, have your guy edit it.
I will.
Yeah, dude. Okay, so ask the question one more time and then I'll.
So the question was, how would you recommend reaching out to influencers, creating a relationship that is beneficial for both sides?
Yeah. And first of all, man, the mistakes are the name of the game, right? And I don't really think, again, that like this word failure or even a mistake, it's like I think the only time we make a mistake is when we know in our heart that what we're about to do is wrong and we do it anyway. That's a mistake. But I think just being genuine and just maybe not knowing exactly how to execute something, but still going for it, that's beautiful. Taking daily imperfect action is the only way to go. So when you're reaching out to anybody in your circle who you feel has a powerful voice and is somebody that you want to learn something from, I mean, no matter what they do, it's just thinking to yourself, okay, have I spent enough time researching what this person is about? Have I been tweeting them on Twitter? Have I been sharing their Facebook posts? Have I been leaving them reviews and categorizing like all the things I've done for them so that when I do reach out to them, I let them know how I'm inspired by their work. I let them know this is what I've done to help you. I've shared it with this many people. I've sent it to my email list or whatever it is. And really just ask yourself that question. Like before I'm about to reach out to somebody, there's this law of reciprocity where there's a nature hates a vacuum, right? Like when we give from a great place, it's really hard for the other person who's receiving a gift to not want to give you something. And this law of reciprocity is out there. Some people refuse it, but most, I would say 90% or more, most actually use this law. So when you're reaching out to influencers, do the work up front. Make sure you're categorizing everything you're doing for them. Take screenshots of the reviews you leave for them. Make sure that you understand who they are, what they do, and why they do it. And then really check in with yourself and ask, okay, before I reach out to this person, am I just trying to get ahead or do I really care about what they're doing? And if you have that conversation, then I think you're going to get twice or even three times as far than just sending out mass emails to people who are kind of making a difference in your circle.
Yeah, definitely. And speaking of influencers, how do you know who to take advice from? Because I'm sure you get a lot of people who, could really be influencers giving you advice that may not really be beneficial for you. And then, so many different perspectives are shared with you. So how do you deal with that in general?
So taking advice is similar to going to a buffet. I mean, the first time you go through the buffet, you're going to try what you think is good, but you get to sit down and eat it eventually. And so the second time you go back, you know what tastes good and what doesn't. I use that metaphor because advice is the same way, man. If you take advice from everyone and anything, you're going to be in information overload. It's going to be too much. And that can actually cause a lot of entrepreneurs to just have what I call analysis or paralysis by analysis. So you're getting too much advice, you're getting too much information. What the best thing to do is pour that concrete foundation and just really figure out, have that honest conversation that we talked about first. Then once you've done the work and you know who you are, what you're doing and why you do it, then you'll be able to take advice from people based on that construct, based on your intuitive edge that you already started to craft, based on this piece of you where you know who you are, at least for this day. I mean, I don't know if we ever know who we are every day, but at least for this one day, when you're thinking about taking advice from someone, take that advice from the standpoint of, does this advice resonate with who I am, what I do, and why I do it? And then also, can I see myself wanting to be in a position from the person who I'm taking advice from? One of the things that I always do when I'm taking advice from someone on business or whatever it might be is I ask myself this true question. I say, do I want to be where they are? Or do I want something that they have? Do they emulate a quality that I think is valuable? And if so, then I'm super open to listen to what they have to say. But here's a good example. If you go to a doctor and the doctor, you can see cigarettes in his pocket, he's 40, 50 pounds overweight, and he's telling you that you need to take statins and you need to do certain things for your health, you're probably not going to take him too seriously. So it's the same thing for your influencer or for somebody that's giving you advice. Do your diligence when you're getting advice from people. What have they created? What have they gone through? What have they actually produced? What tangible things have they produced that they can stand on while they give you advice?
That's really awesome advice. As far as building your network of influencers is a big part of creating a successful brand for any entrepreneur. What advice would you share for people on how to build relationships on Twitter, Facebook, etc.? Because that's kind of a different game. It's an art, something I've admittedly struggled with a little bit till now, because it really is like having a conversation with someone. What have you utilized that has been successful in helping you to build your social media following?
I think for most entrepreneurs, they just have to accept that when they start, it's going to be the hardest part. So the way that you leverage your social assets is when you did that work prior and you had the conversation where you said, who am I, what do I do, and why do I do it? Then you get to see who's your avatar. And an avatar is kind of a term that's thrown around a lot, but I think of an avatar as just the person who, if there were only one in the world, you'd want to serve them. Who is that one person that you'd want to serve? Where do they eat? What are their interests? Where do they hang out? What types of music do they listen to? What are their health habits? Whatever it might be, and start going where those people are. So if, for example, in my business, with digital health, I'm always on the Fitbit page. I'm always perusing different profiles and groups that are associated with digital health or wellness or whatever it is. Because I know that's where my persona is. I know that's where a stressed out mom who's got 3 kids screaming at her and feels like the world's falling down, I know that's where she lives. And so for an entrepreneur that's starting out, once they've laid the groundwork and they've asked those 3 important questions, then go seek out the channels and the groups and the different chat rooms that these people are in. So on Facebook, you can always just do a quick search in the bar, but the power of Twitter is huge because on Twitter, you can hashtag search all the conversations on the planet that are happening associated with your keyword. So let's just say you're an entrepreneur and you are coaching people, but you're narrowing it down. Now you're coaching people who are 30 to 35. You can actually do targeted geo searches now you can have 30 to 35 people who are interested in business and that live in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Or is it Alabama or Tennessee? I don't even know where Tuscaloosa is, but you see what I'm saying, right? You can really channel it down on Twitter. You can channel it down on Facebook. You can use different ads on Facebook marketing. There's Facebook dark posting that you can use. Dark posting is when you run multiple ads, multiple lead gen or lead magnets that don't always appear on your feed for your brand page, but they do appear in the feed for the people that are associated with the list that you've targeted. So I think Twitter and Facebook are huge, but there's really no easy answer, Lucas. I think it stems down to, have you had that conversation about the 3 things? And then are you really putting all your messaging and all your intention on reaching those people who are your customer persona? There's no easy way to build in the beginning, but I think there's an easier way to build, and that is laying the concrete first and coming from that place of just genuine truth.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's all about tracking the small wins that you have with your social media. If it's getting a retweet, if it's getting new followers, because like you said at the beginning, it can be very daunting.
Very much so. Yeah, it can be overwhelming because there's this piece that steps into a lot of entrepreneurs, and I fell prey to it in the first couple of years, and it was comparison. So I don't know who the quote is from, but it's comparison is the thief of joy. And it really is. Like when you start comparing yourself to where you are on your entrepreneur's journey and what you're trying to create, and you start looking at the influences around you, you can basically just want to eat cashews and like watch a movie and never do work again. That might be how you feel, but that's not the truth, because the truth is that you're exactly where you're supposed to be. As uncomfortable as it feels, as disheartening as your progress, whether it be slow or fast might be, like you are in the exact place that you are destined to be right now, because everything that you're creating and everything you're doing, all the work and sweat and tears that you're putting into it, that's what you get to stand on later from a place of confidence. People that have grown up, for an example, privileged, the quote silver spoon in their mouth, they have a lot of problems when they get into their business, because unless they're still working in that system where they're getting fed the resources they need without trying, real world hits hard. People that have had resources given to them their whole lives, they're not bad people. They're awesome people too, just like you and me. But it's all about going through something that you've learned by failing, by doing, by actually taking imperfect action. That's what builds the confidence later for you to be able to stand from a place of, hey, I've been there, I've done that, and I know exactly what to do to help my customer.
For sure. Well, how can you encourage people to take that imperfect action? Because it can be a really tough thing to do, especially in the moment when you're not sure about the outcome. You might really not end up where you want to be. So how do you encourage people to then take that imperfect action?
Because the alternative is that you stay stuck. I mean, there's really no way around it. Like if you don't take imperfect action, then you're going to always wonder what action you're going to want to take. So the only way, it's funny, I was just having a conversation about 3 or 4 hours ago with a friend, And I was telling him, I would much rather take the wrong steps forward and be moving in a direction than to just wonder about what steps I should be taking. That is the ultimate piece of guidance. Anybody listening just wants to take away one thing from this interview, take imperfect action, because analyzing and planning and creating graphs and color coding your action plans and going to seminars and getting certifications, those are fine to a point, but those can actually be a hindrance to progress because you won't give yourself the permission to move forward unless you're feeling like you're doing it right. And you're never going to feel like you're doing it right in the beginning. You're just going to learn by doing. And I think that's what I've learned, is that the imperfect action is the tool for success. How many people have failed miserably and then turned it all around? I think even Henry Ford was bankrupt at one point, way before the Model T. There's many stories of entrepreneurs that just took action for so long that eventually they course corrected. That edge that we talked about, Lucas, the sword, the intuitive sword, the edge, that gets really sharp over time. But in the beginning, you're just doing what you can do. You're grinding your sword. You're figuring out how you're going to cut through all the noise.
So how do you sharpen that intuitive sword you're talking about more specifically?
Yeah, I think it goes back to really just doing the work. Stephen Pressfield has an amazing book. I'm sure you've read it, right? The War of Art.
I actually haven't. I'm going to have to look into that.
Okay, well, you absolutely have to read it. And he talks about this. And there was this point in the book where he finished his project, and I don't want to give it away. And he said, when I was done, it was like slaying a dragon, and the dragon was at my feet. And I don't want to curse on your show, but he basically like cursed at the dragon and said, "Hey, I'm done." And then he went to his mentor, and his mentor said, "Great, you're done with your project that you slaved over. Now here's another one." And that's the template for life. We're going to over and over and over again sharpen the intuitive edge. And there's no easy way to do it other than doing the work. And I love your question. It's a really honest question. I get it. Like, people want to shorten that curve for sharpening the intuitive edge, but the only way it gets sharpened is through blunt force, and blunt force is created through taking imperfect action. So the more imperfect action you take, the better and more strategic your actions are going to become. Like, you'll be able to figure it out in year 3 way faster than in year 1. It'll just happen because you've been there, done that. It's kind of like, have you ever played an instrument, or have you ever played any flutes or guitars or basses when you were a kid?
Oh yeah, I played guitar. I've rapped. I get the music thing.
Okay, so when you were Sir Mix-a-Lot, it was hard in the first couple weeks, but now you can probably bust out 14 verses, and it's no big deal at wherever you are, right? So it's the same thing with the intuitive edge as an entrepreneur, or just as a man or a woman. We experience pain. We remember that pain. We experience pleasure. We knew the steps that took us to either pain or pleasure, and that's what sharpens the edge. It's the experience of the pain. It's the experience of the pleasure, and that's what over time sharpens the edge of whatever action you're going to take next.
Yeah, well, FYI, I can bust out a pretty mean freestyle going 70 to 80 on the I-5, which is one of our freeways here in California for anyone who's listening from out of state. I would say that's a pretty impressive level to get to. I've not gotten in any accidents recently. I'm knocking on wood because I feel like that's pretty good so far. So I totally resonate with what you're sharing about how to sharpen that intuitive sword. And I think what it comes down to is you build that confidence along the way, as long as you allow yourself to, because you have to be in the right mindset to allow yourself to sharpen that intuitive sword. Because like you said in the beginning, it's hard. You're going to make a lot of mistakes. And when that outreach to someone doesn't go like you want it to, you have to be able to step back and say, all right, so where's the 1% where I got better here? Even if everything in that call in your perception went bad, it's about taking that step back and saying, okay, 1%. I was just telling one of my coaching clients this, is at the end of every day, you got to take a step back and say, where's that 1% where you got better? And you need to make yourself do that, because if you're not, you're not giving yourself credit for things that you could have. And ultimately, a lot of us are overachievers. So we ignore those things that we've done well, and we don't see progress. And when you're able to create progress and see progress, I think that's so important, because in the beginning, Josh, it feels like there's not a whole lot of momentum, and you have to create that momentum for yourself. I mean, are there any other suggestions you would have as far as applicable takeaways for people on how to see that momentum for themselves, that progress to kind of keep them going through those tough times in the beginning?
Yeah, I think somebody mentioned this to me a few years back, and it was really powerful because at the time I was like, why is my program not scaling, and why are things happening to me? Little did I know, through doing a lot of personal work, that we attract the lesson that we need to learn. So it's all perfect.
Hmm.
But the thing that I would say, if you're in a place right now where you're just starting and you're a little frustrated and you're kind of looking around you and you're like, man, I've just started, I guarantee you, wherever you are right now is way further than when you started. So if you always look at the beginning point, maybe you started with 5 people on your email list and now you're at 100, that's a celebration point. You don't need to compare yourself to where the finish line is, because, by the way, there's no finish line. You don't need to compare yourself to where other people are that are in your niche, because you don't know their story and they don't know yours. And the last thing is, you get to look at the start line. If you look at the start line and you just glance briefly over your shoulder, don't look back for too long, because you're focusing on what you're creating, but glance over your shoulder occasionally and ask yourself, like, wow, how far have I come? What have I created from the beginning? And I think that is the most valuable lesson for anyone trying to be a creator, because that's what entrepreneurs are, right? They're professional creators. So for creators, pause and remember where you started, because when you started, you weren't creating anything. You're just beginning to create. So always take that frame of reference when you move forward.
Yeah, I think that's an awesome point. And even for people who aren't entrepreneurs, we're all creators of our life. I think that's something that a lot of us don't realize how much power we have. And to take that perspective of you are the creator and you're 100% responsible for everything that you have is really important in the first steps of the journey. It's kind of scary. It's also empowering, though, when you say, like, hey, this is up to me, and that's where a lot of confidence built, and then you embark on the journey of making it happen, and you never know what's going to happen. So, Josh, for you, what was the toughest part of your journey getting to where you are now? And what lesson would you want to share from that journey to help people maybe avoid, if possible, what you went through?
Hmm. Well, there's been many of them. So I really think, I don't know if there's one, but I'll just go with the one that comes up right now. Um, Relationships in the entrepreneur's journey. Who you're with has to understand that there's just something about you that's a little bit different. It doesn't mean that it's wrong, or that you're better. It just means that you're a little bit different. And as an entrepreneur, you are not comfortable just receiving the same kind of check and the same situation every week. So you have to be in a relationship with people that understand that. And there had been a time when I was dating someone and it did not match up like that. And it was a really huge gut check moment. And I had to make that decision that, if I'm really trying to create what I'm trying to create and it's important to me, then this relationship unfortunately has to end, because the amount of work that it's going to take for me to work on me, because the personal development and the business development and just the embodiment of who you are, that has to line up with the other person. And unfortunately, the timing isn't always perfect. So I think the most challenging thing that I've ever experienced is being in a relationship that was a lot of work while being an entrepreneur. That's a really hard one. And I think what I learned that I would shorten the curve for other people on is, right from the beginning, set extremely clear expectations around how much time you can spend together, When I'm going to be there with you, I'm going to be 100% there, but I might not be around 100% of the time. And just let them know right up front, honest, healthy boundaries, clear communication, and understand that what you're about to do, if you're serious about creating something, is going to take the majority of your soul. So if your partner understands that, whether it be female or male, it doesn't matter. If your partner understands that, because of the healthy communication you put into the mix up front, that's going to shorten the curve for you. And you might avoid having a pitfall. But with that said, you're an entrepreneur. So you're going to fail and it's going to be a lesson. It's going to be a gift wrapped in silver.
So how long did it take you to kind of come to grips with the fact that you needed to break that off?
I think it was around 6 months. Yeah. And this was years ago. This was probably 4 years ago. And I just realized at this point, and this is really kind of early in the race where I felt, if in the beginning I communicated better, it probably would have ended up differently. However, looking back on that, it just prepared me for the next time around. The lessons that I learned in that relationship just taught me to have better communication skills as a man and as an entrepreneur about being honest and coming from a place of real truth where I'm telling exactly what I'm capable of, because that's going to come up in business too. You're going to want to do everything with everyone, and then you're going to burn out and it's not going to happen. So healthy boundaries is the name of the game. And I think that learning curve is different for everyone.
Definitely. Well, speaking of the future, what would you say you want to be, or where do you want to be in 5 to 10 years with yourself and Wellness Force?
Yeah, awesome question. So if I'm just waving a magic wand, then I'm creating a community, a large community built of experts, people who are passionate about health and wellness, people who have done the work, people who have used their life as a template, whether they're a nutritionist, a massage therapy worker, a personal trainer, an FDN practitioner, a digital health coach, right? Whoever you are and what story you've been through, that is what is going to make you strong. And so I want to have a board of people who are passionate and strong like that as a resource for people who are just possibly starting their journey, starting their path, learning what it is to be able to help other people. So, and giving them the tools that they might need, right? So working with people on a one-on-one basis, working in large groups, having financial abundance through those groups, but then also offering massive value to people who are just beginning their health and wellness journey as a practitioner or as a coach. And also giving them some tools from a digital standpoint, setting up their podcast, showing them how to scale their digital business and showing them how to create different funnels and systems and lead magnets. There's a lot of moving pieces right now, Lucas. And I think as time goes on, those pieces are going to grow and multiply even more. I think that having a passion and having a mission is great, but you get to be able to have a loud voice to cut through all the noise that's out there too. And I think that's what I see Wellness Force being is a resource for health and wellness professionals and health and wellness people who are really trying to make a difference so that they can have something to fall back on and trust for tools and resources that they can use in their life and their business.
Certainly. And speaking of tools and resources, let's revert back to now. How can the audience help you to get to that magic wand moment? What steps could they take right now?
Well, if the audience is out there and anything I've said resonated at all, check out the Wellness Force podcast, because a lot of the things that I put into words here on the show, I put into action on my show, and I put into easily digestible strategies on the website. So if I said something that sparked you, you can head over to wellnessforce.com. You can go to the Wellness Force podcast on iTunes. If it resonates, leave a review. Those help a lot. Those are gold. Leaving a review on someone's podcast, as I'm sure you know, Lucas, can really help get the word out for more people to find what it is that you're doing. So those are two ways that you can really help. Go to the website, download all the free content, download and read all the articles, and just ask yourself those questions. Who am I? What do I do? And why do I do it? And if you're fuzzy on that, I can help you.
Okay, well, I'm going to link to Wellness Force in the show notes so everyone can check that out at schoolofdreams.co. Do you have a favorite piece of content that you've put up on your site other than the podcast that you think would be a best read, if you will, for people?
There's a video on my press link, and it's my story. It's a 20-minute version of what I told you in the beginning. And I think that would really resonate with people. And it's wellnessforce.com/press.
Cool. Okay. Well, I will also link that in the show notes too. And to wrap things up, Josh, so, here we are now. What advice or insights would you share with your younger self that you know now that you wish you knew then?
Yeah, give yourself permission to feel. Don't be so focused on head down creating that you don't have the knowledge to stop and breathe. I think when I was in my early 20s and I was just so focused on getting away from the pain, that the tool set wasn't there for me to actually have emotional intelligence. I've done a lot of interviews lately with some people around emotional intelligence. And if I could kind of hop into a DeLorean and go back with Marty McFly, I would probably say that. I would say, hey, 21-year-old Josh, just know that everything is going to be okay. And you get to feel what you feel, because emotional intelligence is actually what really shortens the curve. That's what gives you the permission to move from that place of actually, instead of just doing, then you get to get closer to being instead.
So basically you're saying to be okay with that feel of failure, and maybe if you're being a little negative with yourself, be okay with that. No, don't get on your case with that sort of feeling.
Yeah, I mean, getting on your own case is okay as long as you're actually feeling what you're feeling. Now, the phrase "getting on your own case" is not exactly empowering. It's more like feeling angry about something is okay. Feeling frustrated about something is totally okay, because by you feeling that, you move through it. But if you don't give yourself, like, if, for example, if you're angry and then you're angry that you're angry, that's not healthy. That's not going to help you grow. But what is going to help you grow is if you just let the anger go through. You just move through it, figure it out. Don't get into a shame spiral where you're mad about what you're mad about. Just be mad about something. Just be frustrated about something. And before you know it, if you're open, if you're honest, and if you're really just doing the work, if you're having those real conversations with yourself, you'll find that most of the anger comes from your ego anyways. It's just your ego not wanting to look stupid or not wanting to be embarrassed. But we're all dorks, so it doesn't matter. I mean, everybody's trying to be so serious, and we're all just dorks trying to find our way.
So is there like a start to finish process for that feeling? Like how can we help people from a standpoint of knowing when they are finished? Like, can we give them a guideline? For example, you can yell and scream about everything that's happening for like 5 or 10 minutes, and then you have to stop. Like how can we give them something that is actionable?
Well, with emotions, it doesn't work that way. There's no guide, there's no template to emotion. The only thing that I'll say is that if you're moving forward and you're making mistakes and you get upset or whatever it is, just allow yourself to be in that space. So there's no timeline, there's no guide, there's no template. You just got to go through it. People always look for the shortcut, kind of going around emotions. Look at how popular sports are. Look at how popular television is. Look at how popular unhealthy food is. All these things are weapons of mass distraction to pull you away from feeling what it is you already feel. If you just feel the damn thing and just work through it, then you wouldn't need all the distractions and you'd get to where you want to be faster. So no template though.
No. I that's awesome. I'm glad you said that. And I think the most important insight to take away is that you have to work through it. So, even if you feel like you're quitting or you feel like you're a failure, you have to work through that. You can't just back off because you're feeling those things. Because the inclination when you're feeling those things is to want to quit and to take action towards doing that. So, maybe take 24 hours if you're feeling something, or do something that's going to help you to kind of get rid of that feeling before you take action that can really be detrimental to you. I mean, I learned very early on in this process, I had to let myself process what my feelings were before I acted, because I had a challenge where I would make some rash decisions early on, and I didn't really hash out the feeling of everything. I didn't kind of let itself come out and really understand that was part of the process, and it ruined some of my relationships early on in my business. So I think what you're saying is spot on. You have to let yourself work through it. And sometimes 24 hours later, if you've been feeling crappy, just because you gave yourself that time and you didn't quit or whatever, you'll have made a step forward just by doing that. So keep that in mind.
Absolutely.
Well, excuse me. Well, Josh, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. So many amazing insights. Again, you can find Josh Wellness Force on iTunes. Link that in the show, wellnessforce.com. Any last words for the audience here, Josh, before we sign off?
Yeah, it's actually my favorite quote. It's a really powerful one. It's by Ralph Waldo Emerson. And it's, do the thing and you'll have the power. So don't plan about doing the thing. Don't get paralyzed. Just do the thing. Just take the imperfect action. You'll know how to course correct as you go along the way.
Awesome. Short, sweet. Love it. Emerson's the man. Well, Josh, thanks again for coming on the show. And until next time, Dream Chaser Nation, keep on chasing those dreams down.